Alright guys, so a couple of days ago, Briahna Joy Gray of the Bad Faith podcast was officially fired from The Hills Rising in what I think any reasonable observer could conclude was because of her principled opposition and criticism of Israel's genocide in Gaza, as well as their apartheid and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. And it looks like The Hill was basically looking for any opportunity that they could find to push her out of the show. So here was her initial response to this situation. She says, it finally happened. The Hill has fired me. There should be no doubt that Rising at The Hill has a clear pattern of suppressing speech, particularly when it comes to criticism of the state of Israel. This is why, a couple of years ago, they fired Katie Halper, and it was only a matter of time before they fired me. And if I'm correct, I believe they fired Katie Halper because she was, at the time, one of the contributors to The Hill, and she was calling Israel an apartheid state, which, as a reminder, every single major, reputable human rights organization on the face of the planet, including Israeli human rights organizations like B'Tselem, agree is an apartheid. So for being objectively correct on that characterization, Katie Halper was forced out, and for being objectively correct on a number of different issues on what has been happening over the last 8 months in Gaza, Briahna Joy Gray was also forced out. And she also says you can continue to follow her at her Bad Faith podcast, and there's her Patreon. All of this will be linked down below if you want to go show some support, obviously, for Briahna. I also thought that it was kind of noteworthy that in this, letter of termination or notice of contract termination here from The Hill, guys, they misspelled her name. They misspelled her name. You can see, Dear Briahna Joy. They misspelled it. There's supposed to be an H in there, right? You think they didn't know how to spell her name? This is your employee, right? So, maybe just a little bit of a added layer of pettiness to this entire situation. Now, in terms of the proximate cause of her firing, right, the immediate justification, I think, that led them to actually pull the trigger on firing Briahna was this recent interview that they did with a sister of one of the Hamas hostages that is being held inside of Gaza. And this was about 6 days ago, a week or so ago. And towards the end of this interview, and you guys can go watch the whole thing. Again, it'll be linked down below if you want to go watch the entire thing. But throughout this interview, there's sort of a balancing act going on here that put Briahna in an incredibly difficult situation where you have somebody who I think most people would be sympathetic towards, right? This is somebody whose sister, whose family member was taken as a hostage. If my sister was taken as a hostage, I would be losing my goddamn mind, right? In any situation. So on the one hand, you obviously feel a degree of sympathy for this person. But on the other hand, this is also a person who throughout the entirety of this interview was basically just lying about a number of different things, or at least twisting the truth on a number of different things, right? When it comes to Israel's handling of what happened on October 7th and what happened after October 7th, as well as some more specific lies about what Hamas did or did not do on October 7th. And so towards the end of this interview, she basically, the sister of the hostage in Gaza, basically takes a direct shot at Briahna, and Briahna sort of gives like a half eye roll at this call out from the sister of this hostage here. And I think this is probably what led to them, again, pulling the trigger. So I just want to show you guys the last bit of this interview so we can get a glimpse of exactly what is going on here. So let's go ahead and jump into this clip.
And if the world won't help us, we will see 9/11 the second time in the U.S. as well. Because we can already see in the United States, in Michigan, rallies that's calling death to America, not condemning terror organizations in Israel or any other place, in fact, is reflecting to your country as well.
I'm just going to push back against the implication that in Michigan, which has the largest Muslim and Arab population in America, that there is any threat of terrorism from our own people. And I would like to clarify also that one of the rationale that was presented for 9/11 was discussed with America's support of Israel's continued occupation of Palestine. So that's neither here nor there. I really do hope that Netanyahu agrees and Israel agrees to the ceasefire deal that could bring all the hostages, including your sister, home. And I'm sure many people watching are praying for her safety.
Thank you. Me too. And I really hope that you specifically will believe women when they say that they got hurt.
All right. Thanks for joining. Stick around. More Rising coming up next.
So I mean, I'm going to put it on mute here and just rewind one more time. It's almost like an eye roll that you could have missed, right? I mean, it's coming up here. She sort of gives like, there it is, like, okay, like a slight eye looking over to the right. Not even a full eye roll. And what was she rolling her eye at here, right? She was rolling her eyes because this person who they had on the show was directly calling her out. For what exactly? Well, I think what she was alluding to there is that Briana Joy Gray factually and correctly has been skeptical of the claims that have been coming out from the Israeli government that there was some sort of a mass coordinated campaign of sexual assault on October 7th. This is something that we saw in the since debunked New York Times reporting that was called Screams Without Words. This is a claim that we've seen over and over and over again that has not been substantiated with any verifiable evidence whatsoever. Okay, so when you get called out directly by a guest like that on something that I think you're as close to objective reality as you can possibly get on, it's hard to not roll your eyes, right? And especially when, if you guys notice, a couple seconds before she attacked Briana in this interview, what was she saying? She was saying that in the United States of America, in Michigan, there's going to be another 9/11? Because what? Because there have been protests against this endless onslaught of against innocent men, women, and children inside of Gaza? That there's going to be a 9/11 style terrorist attack because of this scary Muslim population in Michigan? I mean, these are some bizarre, ludicrous, incendiary claims that are going on in this interview. Now, I understand to some extent if you work for a corporate media outlet like The Hill or like CNN or MSNBC or whatever the case may be, you have sort of like a tighter responsibility to be somewhat more professional, right? On my channel here, I'm speaking for myself. This is my reputation. I don't have anything to prove to anybody, right? So those are sort of the stakes of my channel. If I'm interviewing somebody and I think they're making a ridiculous point, I'm going to tell them that straight to their face, right? I'm going to roll my eyes if I want to roll my eyes. If you're on a network like The Hill and you want to keep your job, right, then it's a slightly different calculation, right? Now, I think the more difficult thing is like, why did they even have this person on in the first place? Again, she was put in an incredibly difficult situation in this interview. But honestly, looking at this, you know, you can have some disagreements with it. I think the eye roll was as close to as perfectly justifiable as you could possibly imagine. Okay? So that seems like it was kind of the proximate justification for finally pushing Briana Joy Gray out of The Hill. Now, there have been some other things that have happened since then. Namely, Briana posted this on Twitter saying that hundreds of Zionists have spammed the Bad Faith account, apparently thinking that they're emailing her Patreon, right? Or that they're emailing Patreon to try to get Briana Joy Gray canceled and removed from Patreon so that she can't even make money off of her own personal channel, the Bad Faith podcast, right? And so you have all of these emails, I mean, by the dozens, if not the hundreds, where people are basically doing a copy-paste of the same exact email, lying about Briana and sending it to the wrong account, but intending to send it to Patreon to try to get her removed off the platform entirely. Again, so that she cannot make money in the process of trying to do good work in criticizing the current genocide in Gaza. So, I mean, let's go ahead and read some of these emails that were being copy-pasted and attempted to be sent to the Patreon people, right? So they say here, "Dear Patreon, quote, when Hamas is talking about eliminating Israel, it's talking about not killing all of the Jews. It's about eliminating the idea of a Jewish state, or Zionism, in other words, right?" So they're quoting Briana Joy Gray there, apparently, and they're saying, these are some of the words, the radical, crazy, insane words of Briana Joy Gray. "You recently platformed Gray, who is hosting the Bad Faith podcast on your network, and as you know, Miss Gray was fired from The Hill after she mocked the sister of Israeli hostage Romi Gonet for stating, 'I really hope that you specifically believe women when they say that they got hurt.' Since the terror events of October 7th, Gray has engaged in constant anti-Jewish propaganda." So again, they're just smearing her. Referring to the terrorist organization Hamas, Gray stated that, quote, Violence is not a violation of international law. Okay, to be fair, I don't know the context in which Briahna made that statement, but that's objectively true. Violence is not a violation of international law. Yeah, there are specific kinds of violence. If you're just wantonly going around killing civilians, then that is a violation of international law. If you are resisting occupation and you're trying to go after the military apparatus that is occupying you illegally, then that's perfectly justifiable under international law. So it depends what you're talking about here. Which is also kind of a bizarre statement to make from a Zionist, right? Violence is not a violation of international law. Saying that as if that's a crazy statement, isolated in and of itself, you know, amidst what Israel is doing inside of Gaza, which obviously these Zionists would say is perfectly justifiable. But anyways, that's just a hypocrisy burn there. They say, she, like many of her followers, see the events of October 7th, which resulted in the deaths of 1,200 Jewish people and their allies, as justified resistance. I don't believe that Briana Joy Gray has ever said that. I don't believe that Briana Joy Gray has fully endorsed the actions, everything that Hamas did on October 7th. Okay, I think that's just a complete lie, right? Now they say, perhaps even more disgustingly, Gray has engaged in profound denialism when it comes to Jewish victims. In December 2023, she said that, quote, Zionists are asking that we believe the uncorroborated eyewitness accounts of men who describe alleged rape victims in odd fetishistic terms. Here, Gray is mocking the efforts of Zaka, a religious organization in Israel that documented the atrocities committed against Israeli men, women, and children while ensuring their bodies could be buried in accordance with Jewish law, custom, and dignity. For Gray, Me Too is a movement that excludes Jewish victims and those who stand up for them. Guys, this is disgusting. This is absolutely disgusting. First off, Zaka, this organization that they cite in this email, is a completely discredited organization at this point. They have been caught in numerous examples of brazen lies about what happened on October 7th. This is not a credible organization that you're citing here. So to turn around and to say, because Briana Joy Gray is actually trying to follow the evidence in terms of what actually happened on October 7th, and trying to debunk some of the Israeli government lies about what happened on October 7th, because she's actually trying to figure out the truth of things, therefore she's what? She's anti-feminist, or she's just not believing women, or something like that? What are we doing here? I mean, this entire email is just, it's chock full of lies and smears and dishonesty, and it's all in service of trying to get Briahna not only fired from the Hill, which she already now has been, but to get her completely removed off of Patreon so that people who enjoy her content, people who support her content, can't even go and personally donate to her so that she can continue to make a career out of it and continue to make content on the platform. I mean, this is just so disgusting, top to bottom. We're talking about hundreds of these emails that were sent. I think there should be a follow-up, journalistic investigation into who exactly is organizing this. Who's mass sending these emails with these dishonest smears baked inside of them? Now we finish off with this, because I think this was another valid point that Briahna brought up about this entire situation, right? So she was quote tweeting a clip that was floating around of her and Robbie talking about, some certain topic of Rashida Tlaib being censured, etc., etc. And she says this is an important point. Being repeatedly wrong on the facts while also being dismissive of your factually correct co-host, she's talking about Robbie here, doesn't warrant dismissal. And she's not saying that it should, nor did shouting fuck during taping, which I guess is something that Robbie did. But we're to believe that this is about an eye roll. This isn't to bring Robbie into this, but to point out that decorum arguments are silly and unsupported. And she was responding to this tweet here that said, imagine a news outlet, talking about The Hill, that would allow one journalist to outright lie about personally seeing 40 beheaded and or burnt babies, but fire the other journalist who has been consistently accurate and adamant about correcting weaponized misinformation and propaganda. And I think that that's a good point that should be brought up in this kind of a context, right? And I'm not saying that Robbie should be fired. I think he's kind of terrible at his job, to be honest. I don't really watch The Hill that much. From what I have seen of Briahna and him debating, he seems like just an aggressively pro-Zionist commentator who can't really see through and have like a nuanced conversation about some of these things, but that's neither here nor there, right? I don't really care about Robbie. My point is that you have an outlet like The Hill, and this is part of the flaw with working for a corporate news outlet in the first place, right? You have an outlet like The Hill where they can come to you and they can say, in the abstract, okay, you can say whatever you want within reasonable grounds, right? You can say whatever you want on this platform and do your best to provide accurate information to people. They can say that, but at the end of the day, they have full control over your destiny. they can turn around and fire you on a whim if they disagree with your personal politics or your personal coverage, even if it's factually accurate about any given issue. And with this issue, obviously, it comes down to Israel. And so what you have here is a situation where you can have one host who lies about 40 beheaded babies or babies put in ovens, which never happened. You can have somebody who comes on the show and who lies about, a mass coordinated campaign of sexual assault on October 7th. And they can be perfectly fine. They can be protected in that situation. Why? Because they're defending power. They're defending the official established position of the United States government. So lying in service of protecting the status quo is not something that offends corporate media outlets. That's perfectly fine. You may even get a pay raise if that's what you're doing. But if you're somebody who questions the status quo, if you're somebody who criticizes the US government, if you're somebody who criticizes Israel especially, which is like its own, specific issue that has a heightened level of criticism around it, if you are somebody, even if you are fully accurate and fully honest in your critiques, that goes after the establishment in this way, then you can be let go. And that's what it looks like happened here. So I'm not, fully endorsing everything that Briahna Joy Gray has ever said. I'm sure, if we broke it down, we'd probably have disagreements on certain topics. But this is very clearly just a censorship attempt from a corporate media outlet. As clear as day, right? You have somebody who's, I think, is doing pretty good work from what I've seen, covering this kind of a sensitive and difficult issue. She's doing her best, and she gets fired because the Hill doesn't like her coverage on this, right? They don't think that she is sufficiently falling in line when it comes to support for Israel. And so, shout out to Briahna. I hope that she does well moving on from here. Go show her some love, support, subscribe to her Patreon, whatever you guys want to do. And I'm sure that she'll be fine, right? Because she has her own channel, and I think that channel does relatively well. And I'm sure this is not going to silence her. This is not going to shut her up. But it is just yet another reminder in terms of the flaws of corporate media outlets.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like you. Believe me, everyone is saying